Hi guys, so now that I have my mold wrapped, I am going to take my slab of clay and I am going to put it around my mold, remembering again that I can't keep it here until the clay starts to dry out or else it's going to start to crack. This is just a temporary mold until the clay is a little bit firmer and I can remove it. All right, so I've got my clay slab over here ready to go. So this is just clay that I've put through a roller. I'm gonna just use my fingers here to squish it down a little bit more. The good thing about using a roller like this is that I can make the clay an even thickness, fairly even consistency. You can also make slabs like this with a rolling pin. You just need something to set the height of your rolling pin so that stays consistent. What you don't want with your clay is to have vastly different heights and thicknesses of clay. It'll make your drying time weird. Again, you don't want anything to be much thicker than, say, your thumb. Okay, so I just kind of push it down around the mold. You can see there's a couple of pieces over here where I need more, and there's a couple of pieces over here where I've got too much. So just take and a little bit off of here. Whenever you attach two pieces of clay, you want to make sure that you slip and score. So when you're scoring something, you're making deep kind of incisions like this. I'm just using a needle tool to do this. You can use a skewer or whatever you have. Okay, so I've slipped and scored this, and I've slipped and scored when I'm attaching, or I'm sorry, I've scored it. Now I'm going to slip it, which in this case is just adding a little bit of water to it. Clay slip is clay plus water, so it's basically glue for your clay. Now, the reason that you have to do this, slip and score, when you're attaching something, is because the clay will seem attached while it's wet, but once it dries, the water that was kind of holding everything together, that bond will be loosened and your clay, anything you add to your clay will fall off. So take time to slip and score as you're building onto your clay pieces, and that's going to make them hold together. Otherwise you'll work really hard on, say, not something like a lump like I'm attaching now, but like a nose or, you know, an ear. You'll work really hard on something and attach it and it'll look like it's stuck on, but then as soon as it dries and that little surface tension that's created by the wetness of the clay, as soon as that's dry, that piece will fall off. So slip and score every time you're attaching something new. My goal right now is simply to cover this ball with clay that's about the same thickness. Again, cutting off any pieces that are really excess, and then I'm adding in. I can't just push this in or else it will fall off. I'm going to slip and score. So I score with my tool. Dry fit it. Doesn't matter if you go beyond the area where you're attaching something. I find it's better to put too much score in there and then have to go back and smooth it out than not enough. This kind of creates, you know, the ability for these two separate clay pieces to interlock with one another. There's, you know, a level of moisture that you're going to want here. I will say, you know, well, you can't maybe score too much. You can slip too much. If you add too much water, it's going to be too wet and it's going to be hard to control. So, you know, go easy on the water. You don't want this to turn into like a slop pile. But scoring, you really can't score too much in this case. All right, so I'm gonna turn it. So you can see I've got little pieces over here that need to come off. Oops. Just gonna use my needle tool roughly around the bottom. Take that piece away. When I turn it over here, it's got a gap. And though this might seem a little excessive to slip and score even in an area like this, I want you guys to start off with good habits when you're working with clay, practicing slipping and scoring everything that you're adding together so that you get good bonds. Again, I'm not going to worry about, you know, putting some lines in it because I'm going to smooth this out in just a little bit and I'll be able to take those lines back out. All right, so all the way around, I've got clay of approximately the same thickness. I've added some pieces, I've taken some away. I definitely have some texture here from where it's gone through the roller that I want to get rid of, and I do have some lumpiness as well from where I've worked it with my fingers. So I've got a couple things to work on that with. I've got a rib tool. You can, you know, use your fingers wet for this, or you can use something like a rib tool to help flatten. I've also got a sponge here. All right. I'm going to add just a little bit of water. The clay that I'm using is recycled clay, and it is a little firmer than clay maybe straight from the bag would be, just because it's been dry once and we've recycled it. So I'm going to push down with this rib tool, and I'm just kind of trying to even out any vastly different high and low places. This is going to create more texture in a different way, I guess. If I see any places where I've got low places, this clay is still so wet right now, I could probably work in a little bit of clay, kind of patch that area. That's something where I maybe wouldn't worry so much about slipping and scoring, because the clay, I just wet it. And I'm going to keep on pushing into the clay. See another little gap. One of my favorite tools actually for working on clay like this is the back of my fingernail. I use the back of my index finger for a lot of stuff when I'm doing hand building. Incidentally, you know, if we're talking about working in ceramics, hand building is, you know, a method of construction. You can also construct things on the wheel, like a bowl type shape like this. This is going to be kind of a hollow bowl. This could be constructed with a mold like I'm doing it now, or it could be constructed with a pinch pot by hand, or something like this could be constructed on a wheel. You have access to a wheel. My personal favorite is hand building, because I like to make sculptures more than I like to make bowls and things like that. There's other ways to build things with hand building. We're using right now a slab that we've put over a mold. We could make long snakes of clay and slowly build them up. That would be the coil method of construction. Pinch pot is, you start with like a little ball of clay and you pinch it into a hollow shape. I'm not trying to take a lot of thickness off here. I'm just trying to get it even as I can. So I'm looking for big divots and I'm looking for big mountains. Take those off. Okay. Whenever you've got some leftover clay, if you leave it out, it's gonna dry up. Try to seal it up, put it in a bag to keep it as wet as you can. Especially with this clay that we're using is recycled clay, so it tends to dry out a little easier. So now that I've got everything kind of leveled off, I'm gonna take my sponge and start to smooth. Again, my goal is not to get this clay soaking wet. If you've got water running off the sides of this thing, it's gonna be so wet and soupy, that you're not going to be able to shape it. So really try to control your water. Don't put so much on here that your clay's turning into mush. Just a little bit at a time. Trying to shape the surface, but we don't want to make it so wet that it loses all of its shape and consistency. Be careful with your fingernails, and if you're wearing any rings, one of my rings just gouged on the surface a little bit here. So just be mindful. If you've got long nails, you might want to, trim them back for this project, if you can put gouges in your clay accidentally. Okay, I'm gonna just clean up the bottom part, and that's probably about all I can get at today with this piece. So this one's cleaned up well enough for that first day. If I do have, I want to be really mindful about my tools and clay on my hands, because I don't want to send a bunch of clay slip down the sink. What I want you to try to do is use your cup of water to clean off most of the clay from your hands and most of the clay from the tools. If you've got a little tiny bit of clay left, no big chunks, you can go to the sink and clean off the rest there, but try to clean off the majority of it in your water first. The reason we're doing this here is because you don't want to put clay down your sinks. It will turn into a little clay sculpture and stink to high heaven inside of your pipes, so you don't want to do that. It'll ruin your pipes. We'll take this water and we will, it's all the stuff that's in here is all natural, so it's fine just to water the grass with it. So we'll dump it outside and not down the sink. Please make sure that you don't just go right to the sink with hands full of clay and tools full of clay. Your tools will need to be cleaned and dried and put back every day that you use them, okay? So I want to show you one more thing before I sign off here. I've got one started on the human face shaped mold. Get this aside. So I've not trimmed the edges yet, but you can see this is what it's going to sort of look like on that mold. You can see just some hints of where the eyes and the nose and the mouth are going to be. These molds are good for getting that general oval head shape, but you lose the details of the nose and things when you put your clay on the mold. So anyway, that's where we're going to stop for today. Make sure you're cleaning up after yourself, and we'll pick it up next time. All right, bye.